Hey everybody, welcome back to the Wolf Pit with another episode of What Are We Eating? Well, this is a What Are We Eating video, but it's also a cooking video. Do you guys remember a while back when I tried the beef chuck short ribs from Walmart? Well, before that video and now after that video, these inexpensive beef chuck short ribs have become a real favorite of mine and my family's. As I mentioned in that video, I usually don't like to buy meat from Walmart unless it's brisket, which they always have USDA choice briskets on sale for just a little over $3 a pound. And around here, that's a great price. Almost all of their other meats, the chicken and the pork, are highly pumped full of solutions, so I try to avoid Walmart meats at all costs. And that's just my personal opinion. If you shop at Walmart and like their meats, that's great. My daughter Lisa does, and I still love her. I just don't love her as much as I do my daughter Catherine, who doesn't buy her meats at Walmart.
No!
Alright, so I'm not here to talk all negative about Walmart's meat department, and I'm really hoping I found another good product in their meat department. While my wife drugged me into Walmart the other day, I went strolling through their meat department, really just to do a little bit of window shopping, when these double packs of beef rib racks caught my eye. They're processed and packaged by the same company, BBQs, that packages the beef chuck short riblets. So at $2.24 a pound, I said, what the heck, I'll give them a try. So I got these 2 packs. So since this is kind of a what are we eating video and a cooking video, I've got to mention the only ingredients in the package are beef ribs. And per 4 ounces of meat, there's 400 calories, 36 grams of total fat, 16 grams of saturated fat, 70 milligrams of cholesterol, 55 milligrams of sodium, no carbohydrates, no fiber, no sugars, and 17 grams of protein. And as you can see when we pull them out of the package, they're pretty meaty. But just like on the beef chuck short riblets, you get one really meaty rack, and then the other rack with a little less meat. But still, for that price, I think it's a decent deal. That is, if they taste any good. So we're going to season these racks on both sides with salt, pepper, and garlic. And just like with my pork ribs, I don't remove the membrane. I personally like eating the membrane once it renders down and gets crunchy and chewy. And like I said before, I also think the membrane helps with moisture, and it helps hold your ribs together if you happen to overcook them. But if you want to remove the membrane, go right ahead. Once the beef ribs are seasoned on all sides, pop them into the fridge, and let's get our grill preheated. And today, I'm using my Lone Star Grill's mini insulated cabinet water smoker. And like you've heard me say before, this thing is anything but a mini. I'm going to load it up with Fogo's Super Premium Lump Charcoal, which has turned into my favorite go-to lump charcoal. I get very consistent, long, clean burns with it, with very little ash. I'm going to fill up the mini's firebox by pouring the Fogo's Super Premium Lump Charcoal on top of some leftover Fogo Premium Charcoal. And the difference between the Fogo Super Premium Lump Charcoal and the Premium Lump Charcoal is the size of the charcoal. So after the lifelong debate, size does matter. The Fogo Super Premium Lump Charcoal are really big pieces, which are more suitable for low and slow cooking, and the Fogo Premium Lump Charcoal are medium-sized pieces, which are more suitable for grilling. Once the mini's firebox is filled up with lump charcoal, I've added 3 of the Fogo's all-natural fire starters. And just like before, these are magic fire starters, and all you have to do is say light. Are they amazing or what? So let the fire starters burn and get a nice bed of coals rolling. And with this being a water smoker, you gotta add water. You add it from the filler tube at the top, and it flows right down into the water pan. Keep adding water until it's all the way full. Now let the mini go with the top and bottom door open for about 10 minutes. After we have a nice little bed of coals going, we added some hickory chunks, and then close up the mini with the top and bottom vent open 100%. And then once it gets to 200 degrees, we shut the top and bottom vents down accordingly, and then slowly let it rise to 250 degrees. And then once it's at 250 degrees, it's time to add our beef ribs. Now I can spread the ribs out on all 4 racks, but it's simpler if we just keep them all on one. Now once the ribs are added, close the Mini by slamming the door with the slam latches, and then let the ribs go for 5 to 6 hours or until they're tender. And we have our nice clean burning light blue smoke. And here's what the ribs look like after 2.5 hours. And they're starting to get a nice pullback, but they obviously still have a ways to go. So close the Mini back up and let them continue to cook until they're tender. Now here's what our beef ribs look like after a little over 5 hours. And as you can see, you got a lot of shrinkage, but that's all that excess fat that's rendered down. And these were probe tender and right around 200 degrees. So it's time to pull them off and let them rest for a few minutes, and then it'll be time to try these. And here's what they look like after cooling down before we cut them up. And you can see there's still a whole lot of meat on these. Now here they are after we cut them up. And I've got to say, I think they look pretty darn good. They're very moist, and they have a nice little smoke ring. But the true test is, how do they taste and how tender are they? Just look at all the meat on that, and look how moist it is. There's a nice salt and pepper and garlic crust on the outside. And the inside is moist and tender. Look at how clean that bite turned out. These are melts in your mouth delicious and amazingly tender. They might not be the best looking beef ribs you've ever seen, but for $2.24 a pound, I think these are a hell of a deal, especially with the amount of meat you get on them. So I'd give these BBQs, beef rib racks from Walmart, a 9 out of 10. Just like the BBQ's Beef Chuck Short Riblets, these are pretty good quality for a really decent price. And I will definitely be getting both of them again, sooner than later, and I'd recommend you give them a try too. If you'd like to help support the Wolf Pit, consider being a patron. You can pledge as little as $1 a month, that's only $12 for the whole year. Or you can pledge more, that's up to you. Either way, every little bit's appreciated and helps me produce more high-quality videos more often for you, the people. Thank you all very much for watching. Please don't forget to like this video, share it with your family and friends, and I'll see you soon.
Although most people think of spies as a Cold War phenomenon, they've actually been around for hundreds of years and include in their ranks larger-than-life figures like big game hunters, Revolutionary War heroes, and even exotic dancers. While these real-life spies might not have cool gadgets or fast cars like James Bond, their lives still make for some pretty amazing stories. So sit back with a shaken not stirred martini and have a watch of this video as we go through 10 masters of espionage throughout history. Number 10. Allan Pinkerton. Alan Pinkerton was a Scottish detective who pioneered many spying techniques that are still used today. He was one of the first detectives to shadow his subjects, and his undercover operations, what he called assuming a role, helped shape modern espionage. In 1850, he founded the Pinkerton National Detective Agency, a group of private detectives and policemen. The group was well known throughout the 1800s and is best remembered for their involvement in the tracking and capture of several Old West outlaws. During the American Civil War, Pinkerton was the head of the Union Intelligence Service and was a close advisor and confidant of Abraham Lincoln. He helped foil an assassination plot on Lincoln in 1861, planted agents inside the Confederate Army, and even went undercover as a Confederate officer in order to report on troop movements. Number 9. Klaus Fuchs. A German theoretical physicist and expert on atomic bomb technology, Klaus Fuchs passed on a number of significant weapon secrets to the USSR while working as a scientist for the American government. Fuchs made a number of breakthroughs in nuclear fission and was part of the famed Manhattan Project that led to the development of the atomic bomb. A communist in his youth, he was recruited by a KGB case officer in 1941, and for years he passed on information about bomb technology and the state of the US weapons stockpile to the Soviets. Fuchs was apprehended in 1946 after a Soviet cipher was cracked by Allied intelligence forces, and under interrogation he admitted to working for the Russians. While he is not as well known as Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, the atomic secrets provided by Klaus Fuchs are said to have had a bigger effect on the Russians' knowledge of the US nuclear program. It's even said that this information helped them in their development of their own atomic weapon. Number 8. Elizabeth Van Lew. Elizabeth Van Lew was a spy who worked on behalf of the Union during the American Civil War. Van Lew operated under the cover of a charity worker and was allowed to enter the infamous Libby prison in the southern capital of Richmond to bring Union prisoners food and supplies. While there, she would gather information about Confederate troop movements and pass it on to US forces. She also operated a small spy ring that was based out of Richmond and included several high-profile members of the Confederate government, and it is even rumored that she managed to get one of her former slaves hired on at the White House of the Confederacy to act as an informant. After the war ended, Van Lew was credited by Ulysses Grant as the most valuable source of information on the Confederate capital city. Along with Belle Boyd on the southern side, she is remembered as the most famous spy of the Civil War, and she was eventually inducted into the Military Intelligence Hall of Fame. Number 7. Aldrich Ames. While most spies engage in espionage for political or ideological reasons, for CIA mole Aldrich Ames, the motivation was purely monetary. Ames, who worked as a counterintelligence analyst in Washington, D.C., was desperate for cash, and in 1984 he began supplying secrets to the Soviets in exchange for a fee, eventually receiving over $4 million from the Russians. Over the course of 9 years, Ames supplied the Soviets with countless secrets, including the names of over 100 US informants working in Russia. 10 of these people were eventually executed. Ames used his millions to fund a lavish lifestyle, which attracted the attention of the CIA, but thanks to his intelligence training, he was repeatedly able to pass lie detector tests. He was finally arrested in 1994, and after pleading guilty to spying, was sentenced to life in prison. Interestingly, at least $2 million of his fee remains in an undisclosed bank account, and to this day, the Russians have refused to turn this money over to the American authorities. Number 6. Richard Sorge. Considered to be one of the most skilled spies of the 20th century, Richard Sorge was a Soviet master of espionage who worked all over the world before and during World War II. For much of his career, he operated under the cover of a professional journalist, traveling to various European countries to calculate the chances of possible communist uprisings. At the outbreak of World War II, Sorge traveled to Japan under the guise of a Nazi reporter, and he began supplying the Soviets with valuable intelligence about Japanese and German combat operations. He warned them about the Pearl Harbor attack, the planned German invasion of Russia, and countless other missions, but a lot of his intelligence was ignored by Stalin. Sorge was eventually captured by the Japanese in 1944, and though he never admitted to being a Soviet spy, even under torture, he was executed shortly thereafter. The Soviets did not recognize him or his activities until 1964, at which point he was belatedly hailed as a national hero. Number 5. Sidney Riley. One of the major models for the James Bond character, Sidney Riley was a master spy who worked for a number of governments in the early 20th century. Known as the Ace of Spies, Riley was an expert at deception and self-promotion, so a lot of the information on his life is a bit unreliable. We do know that he was a master of disguise and frequently crossed national borders under assumed identities in order to steal military secrets, building plans, and aircraft prototypes. He was also known for his debonair character and often used his charm to seduce the wives of politicians and military officers, spies in order to steal information from them. In his most famous exploit, Riley worked as the leader of a British intelligence group involved in trying to overthrow the Bolshevik government in Russia in 1917. He helped stage an unsuccessful coup and led an attempted assassination plot on Vladimir Lenin, but his group was eventually found out, and he only narrowly escaped arrest by assuming the identity of a German national and escaping to Finland. He was sentenced to death in absentia by the Russian government, and in 1925 he was lured back to the Soviet Union as part of a sting operation, and he was captured. Though he never admitted to being a spy, he was eventually executed by firing squad. Number 4. Fritz Joubert Duquesne. Fritz Joubert Duquesne was a larger-than-life writer, soldier, and adventurer who gained fame as a spy for the Germans during World Wars I and II. As a young man, he fought against England in his native South Africa during the First and Second Boer Wars, at one point enlisting in the British Army in order to sabotage missions and report on troop movements. The experience helped foster a lifelong hatred of all things English, and at the outbreak of the First World War, Duquesne began working for the Germans as a spy, planting bombs on several British ships that eventually went down at sea. He was captured in 1917 and extradited to New York, but after 2 years in jail, he made a daring escape by cutting through the bars of his cell and scaling the prison walls. He disappeared for some time, working as a freelance journalist and even writing his own biography, before resurfacing at the outbreak of World War II and resuming his spy activities for the Germans. His days of espionage came to an end in 1942 when Duquesne, along with 33 other German spies, were arrested in what became known as the biggest espionage ring conviction in American history. Number 3. Nathan Hale. Considered by many to be America's first spy, Nathan Hale was a soldier in the Continental Army who, in 1776, volunteered to go on a dangerous intelligence-gathering mission behind enemy lines. Hale, who was only 21 at the time, ventured into New York City in disguise in order to report on British troop movements, but after the city fell to the English, he was found out by a British officer and captured. Although spying wasn't widely practiced at the time, Hale was charged with being an illegal combatant and was hanged a few days after being apprehended. Before his execution, he is said to have uttered the now famous line, "I regret that I have but one life to give for my country." This speech and his espionage activities cemented Hale's reputation as one of the heroes of the Revolutionary War, and to this day, a statue of him stands outside the headquarters of the CIA. Number 2. Kim Philby. Perhaps the most famous double agent of the Cold War, Kim Philby was a globe-trotting British spy who, in actuality, was a socialist under the control of the Soviet KGB. In a career that took him to Spain, Africa, the US, Istanbul, and Moscow, Philby gained a reputation as one of Britain's most capable spies, but all the while he was secretly sending along information to the Soviet embassy in Paris. In the late 40s, he was assigned to act as an intermediary between the British and US intelligence organizations in Washington, D.C. During this time, he passed on significant information on US armaments and atomic weapon stockpiles, and many credit these reports with influencing Joseph Stalin's political decisions and helping to lead to the Korean War. Philby was suspected as a possible Soviet spy by British intelligence throughout his career, but they were unable to prove anything, and he remained on the periphery of the intelligence community until he defected to the Soviet Union in 1963. He continued to work in Soviet intelligence until his death in 1988, when he was given numerous posthumous awards by the Russian government. Number 1. Mata Hari. Now recognized as the prototypical femme fatale, Margaretha Gertrude Zell, aka Mata Hari, was a famous exotic dancer and performer who was executed in 1917 for spying for the Germans during World War I. She gained fame in Paris for her risque dance routines and performances, and at the outbreak of the war, she was the mistress and escort to many high-profile businessmen and military officers. As a citizen of the Netherlands, Mata Hari frequently crossed national borders, a practice that eventually attracted the attention of the Allies. When questioned by British intelligence, she claimed to be an undercover spy for the French, but their government, they denied this. Soon after, the French intercepted a German radio transmission detailing the activities of one of their most successful spies. Evidence pointed to Mata Hari as the culprit, and she was quickly arrested and charged with contributing to the deaths of 50,000 people. She was found guilty during a trial and was executed in October of 1917 by firing squad. Although it has never been determined whether she was really working for the Germans or the French, Mata Hari continues to be remembered as one of the most famous spies of all time. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do give us a thumbs up below. Also, we've done a biographics video, which is another channel I do on Mata Hari, where it goes into her whole life story over about 20 minutes. If you want to click below, you will find a link to that channel. So go over there, check it out, subscribe if you want to. And as always, thank you for watching. As go the engraved words upon the gravestone of the not-so-immortal pioneer of flight, Otto Lilienthal, sacrifices have to be made. In pursuit of scientific knowledge and discovery, there will always be those who step out, over, and beyond the call of duty. This video is not about those brave people. This video is for those who've completely launched themselves beyond the call of duty on a motorbike made of science and insanity. Number 10. Robert Bunsen. Born in 1811, Robert Bunsen is most notable now for the invention which carries his name, the famous Bunsen burner. Actually, this was developed by his assistant, but, well, that's another story altogether. This feat, however, was not all that Bunsen was remarkable for, thanks to a lesser-known yet significantly more awesome aspect of his history. Robert Bunsen was sort of like science's answer to Die Hard. During 1840, Bunsen decided to begin working with compounds known as cacodils, despite the knowledge that these cacodils had a number of well-researched risks associated with them. Namely, they are highly explosive, extremely toxic, containing the poison arsenic, liable to combustion in dry air, and perhaps worst of all, the name cacodil is derived from the Greek word for evil smelling. Unfazed and ready to swing some punches for science, Bunsen stepped bravely into the metaphorical ring and promptly lost an eye to a ridiculously predictable cacodil explosion. A flesh wound like a burnt-out eye was not enough to diminish Bunsen's dedication, and he continued his studies undeterred right up until he contracted arsenic poisoning. He continued to experiment with cacodils, braving the effects of the arsenic poisoning, which included muscle cramps, severe diarrhea, partial paralysis, and death, all of which he suffered in his life at one point or another. Eventually, after an impressive and kind of baffling 6 years of living with cacodils, he did move on to safer work, namely taking gas samples from volcanoes and inside blast furnaces. Number 9. Francis Bacon. One of the most well-known figures of the 16th century, Francis Bacon was a renowned scientist, politician, lawyer, philosopher, and he did pretty much everything. Aside from single-handedly raising unemployment rates in England by doing everyone's job, the deliciously named Bacon pretty much pioneered the scientific method that's still in use today. One of Bacon's many contributions to science was the discovery that snow could be used to preserve meat. Upon having this idea, Bacon decided that there was absolutely no time to lose and reportedly charged out headfirst into the snow to investigate without bothering to dress appropriately or return to warmth within a reasonable time frame despite the freezing temperature. He contracted and eventually died from pneumonia, but at least the turkey he stuffed with snow was well preserved. Number 8. John Stapp. Back in the 1940s, as recently as 1945, it was believed that the number of G-forces required to kill a man was 18G. John Stapp decided to challenge this belief and did it in the same way any rational man of science would. He strapped himself to a rocket and subjected his own damn body to it. He performed many variations of these experiments into deceleration throughout his career, suffering a whole host of different injuries, including broken limbs, ribs, detached retinas, and various other traumas, which eventually resulted in lifelong lingering vision problems caused by permanently burst blood vessels in his eyes. You'd think that this might cause him to at least tone down the experiments a little, but, well, you'd be wrong. A man in a rocket is apparently difficult to slow down. In one of his final experiments, he subjected himself to an astonishing 46.2 times the force of gravity. Number 7. Santorio Santorio. Santorio was an Italian professor and colleague of Galileo who just happened to be curiously obsessed by the workings of the human body. So obsessed was he that he elected for 30 years from 1590 to 1620 to spend most of his time living in a tiny room suspended by giant scales. He also weighed everything coming into his body as well as everything leaving it in what has to be one of the least pleasant, bizarre experiments on this list. His experiment is widely celebrated for its empirical methodology, measuring everything and ensuring all findings were accurate, and originated the study of the human metabolism. Number 6. Lazzaro Spallanzani. Another Italian with an obsession with digestion, Lazzaro regularly swallowed sponges on strings, pulling them back out once they'd absorbed his stomach fluids. Clearly, this wasn't already unusual enough, as he proceeded to add various kinds of food to these sponges and